Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here today. Looking forward to chatting with you today. Thank you. Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I unfortunately have decades of experience, which the math works out right. I don't like hearing it, but the math certainly works out to that degree. Way back in the early 2000s, when the internet was really just starting out, I shouldn't say just starting out, but starting out to be this big significant thing in business, this key integral part of any enterprise business, I really found a lot of struggles in people making that transformation. I worked at NBC Universal at the time when I kind of started in digital marketing, went on and spent some time at Disney and then at Marriott. And one consistent challenge I think that really arose was this uh, lack of communication between the technology side of things, IT, and the marketing side. Unlike the pre-internet age, these two groups really needed to be in lock sync. They really need to be in alignment in order to maximize what they're trying to create, this digital customer experience. And because they hadn't been speaking the same language for so many years, it was hard for them to make that translation. So after kind of going through that cycle a few times, we started Smart Panda Labs because we felt like we could help bring together those marketing ideas and that technical execution, bring those things into alignment so people can create and really optimize that digital experience they're looking for. Sure. Well, we say digital experience, and we know that's very, very broad. There's a lot of things included in the digital experience. And while we take all those things into consideration, we really help customers focus on that post-click experience. So after they see the advertising, after they interact with social, whatever the case is, when that person clicks and says, I want to engage with your site, I want to see what it is that you offer. I want to make a decision about potentially becoming a customer of yours or perhaps growing my relationship with you. That's what really help drive that experience. So personalization of that experience, testing into better user experiences, marketing automation, as you kind of mentioned up front, in terms of how we're communicating with you now and building that relationship. So we're really looking at driving down customer acquisition costs, improving acquisition and retention rates, and ultimately improving lifetime value. Yeah, we have a mix. So as you mentioned, we have some that come to us on a very specific engagement. They need something kind of stood up, set up, outlined. We have some customers that come to us just to help them roadmap out what they need to do to drive the digital experience. They know that they want to do these particular things. Perhaps they see their competitors do, or they see in the marketplace in general, but they don't know how to get there. So they need us to kind of say, well, here are the pieces and parts you need to get there, the customer data you need access to, the technical platforms you need access to, the tactics you need to implement in order to drive those kinds of experiences. And then the lion's share of our customers really are helping to manage those experiences on an ongoing basis, and then just iterate and improve. So running experimentation, running personalization, running marketing automation, maintaining, making sure they understand that none of those things are set it and forget it, but that you have to keep improving and keep adapting to the market and to competitors and to people in general. Mhm. Yeah, to be honest, before we even get into tools and get into tactics, we really start with understanding their business apart from maybe the specific things they want to do in the digital space. Just to understand, what are your business goals? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to drive? Are things like valuation important? Are stock prices important? What are those metrics that really matter at that C-suite level? And then we say, okay, great. Now, how do we marry your marketing goals to those bigger business goals? And then we say, what tactics do you need to drive those marketing goals to hit those metrics so that it can therefore influence those bigger C-suite metrics. And now that we understand those tactics that are so important, okay, what are the pieces and parts that we need to drive them? Where do we need room for improvement in order to do that? And then at that point, we get into things like the tools and the assessments of, okay, you're going to need to bring on an experimentation platform because you're not doing any A/B testing, or you need a more robust marketing automation platform so that we can do more personalized communications to your customers, those kinds of things. That's a great question. To be honest, I'd say probably 70, 80% of the time, when it comes to marketing automation specifically, they tend to have tools that will do what needs to be done. So there are times that we have to actually implement a tool, but most times that's not the case. Most times they have tools that can do it. We just have to maybe configure it a bit and then make sure they're getting the most out of the tools. To be honest, most legacy enterprise customers, they have very robust tools. They just aren't getting nearly all they can out of them. They're not truly driving true ROI out of those tools by truly taking advantage of the investment they've made. So they may have an enterprise tool like a Salesforce Marketing Cloud, which is an excellent, incredibly robust tool, but they don't know how to get the most out of it, how to drive the most value from it. And that's where we usually come into play. Yeah, it's funny. One of our core values as a company is they don't know what they don't know, and a lot of times that's what happens. So you see a particular experience out in the marketplace. Maybe you go and you shop online and you see something as simple as a cart abandoned email come to you, but you don't know what it takes to actually make that email happen, to actually create a campaign like that, to measure what it's doing, and then to iterate on that. So where we typically come into play is helping them figure out and educate them on those pieces and parts, and then helping them do that. So a lot of times it's just a lack of knowledge of how those things actually work. And then, as we kind of alluded to earlier, one of the big reasons we started Smart Panda Labs is because, unfortunately, marketing and IT often don't communicate very well, and a lot of times these tools are owned by IT. So marketing has to communicate and say, "Hey, this is what I want to happen." IT has to try to translate that as best they can, and then make that happen. But when marketing is speaking French and IT is speaking Chinese, it's hard to get across exactly what needs to happen there. And then marketing ends up disappointed because it's like, oh, this isn't what we asked for. This isn't working right. IT is like, hey, we did what we told you, what you told us you wanted done. I don't know what to tell you. So really, we kind of come into play and kind of play a diplomat, right? We're the translator. We understand, the French that marketing is speaking. We're able to translate that into the Chinese that IT needs to hear. Now all of a sudden everybody gets it, and then we're able to play nicely together in the sand lot, and we're able to kind of move forward and execute what needs to be executed. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a challenge on both sides, I suppose, but it's not hard. I mean, once you kind of understand what's important to each group, right? So the IT team doesn't care as much about, and typically doesn't care as much about things like the creative aspects of it, right? Or perhaps the overall marketing strategy behind it that's fitting into. They don't care about things like branding and value propositions. So let's not spend time talking about that. Let's spend time talking about functionally what needs to happen, how we increase the uptime of the campaign, how we make sure the campaign isn't throwing errors, the quality of it. Those are the things we talk about with them. And then on the flip side, marketing doesn't really care about the eccentricities of the configurations and the settings that need to happen. How exactly we're creating these audiences, what things we have to take into account, the governance and rules that need to go into place. They care about what are we messaging, what's the value prop, what's the branding, how often are we communicating to them, are we tying our customers out, Are we driving retention? Are we increasing lifetime value, right? Those are the things that marketers care about. So then we focus on those kinds of conversations. And then on the backside, our job is to put all that together and say, this is how all these pieces to the puzzle all fit together in a nice way. And then to fill those gaps and say, all right, marketing, here's what we're going to work with you to do. All right, IT, here's what we're going to work with you to do. Oftentimes for us, it's hands-on in the tool itself, actually doing those configurations, building and managing those campaigns, doing the analysis, the measurement, the testing, and so forth to actually execute those things and make them happen. Yeah, for sure. And one of the things, as we kind of mentioned up front, is they have to align on goals. So we mentioned we start with those bigger business goals. Those are the goals that transcend marketing, that transcend IT, that transcend all the different departments. Well, they each need to understand how their goals stream up to those bigger business goals. And if they both are doing that, then that means they're both doing the same thing. They're just coming at it from different angles. So now they have to have an appreciation for the fact of this is the angle that you're coming at this and solving this problem from. This is the angle that we're coming from. So we're both doing the same thing. We're on the same team here. We're just doing it from different aspects, right? So when you get that kind of alignment, which of course starts always with leadership, but then comes down to the individual team members, that's going to help bring everyone on the same page of, okay, if I do this right and you do that right, then that's going to roll up and hit those larger goals that are so important to the organization. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. No. There's all kinds of challenges that we see there. It's funny. I think what happens a lot, and this kind of happens from two sides, both from inside the organization and outside. So from inside the organization, you get some frustration there, maybe some bad history with IT. So those groups, sales, marketing, they decide, okay, well, I'm going to go to an outside source. I'm going to get this outside tool. This is going to solve what I need to get solved, and that way I won't have to deal with IT. But unfortunately, each group kind of goes in their own silo and does that. So those tools don't necessarily coordinate, collaborate with each other. They don't communicate. They don't integrate with each other. Each one's kind of doing their own thing, and maybe they're hitting the same customer multiple times. They're not able to see what the other group is sending or communicating. So it causes all kinds of issues ultimately for the customer that they can be kind of a bit blind to going into the situation. Then on the flip side, you have SaaS providers coming in saying, we are the solution to all your problems. All you do is stand up this tool. It'll take 2 hours. You'll be up and running. You push this button. You won't need to do anything. No technical help involved. It's all easy. And that's a bold-faced lie. It's never, ever like that. I mean, maybe if your company is like, two guys in the corner shop, it's like that. But we're talking about these legacy enterprise organizations. It's never like that. It's never that easy. But the combination of those two things creates issues where people are just making decisions in silos for what they feel like is best for them. And I get it. We're human. We're selfish. We think first and foremost about ourselves, our own team, our own group, what we need to get done. But what we don't realize is, well, now the customer is experiencing these multiple things that are not connected, that are disjointed. And they're frustrated because what I see on the website isn't the same thing that's happening when I talk to the salesperson, isn't the same thing when I talk to customer support, because they don't have all access to the same information. The customer's confused. It's like, I'm still talking to company A, right? So why don't you, why don't you have access to the information? So it's really about thinking about it from the customer standpoint and saying, look, we need to work together, not as desperate groups, but we need to work together to really organize and think about what we need so that we can solve this technologically, certainly, but we can also solve this with the right processes and resources that we need as well. And when they do that, really they're saving money, right? Because maybe they don't need 3 different platforms to do this. Maybe they just need one and need to understand how sales is going to use the platform, how marketing is going to use the platform, how IT is, or HR, or PR, or wherever the other groups are, as almost everyone needs are taken into account, you'll probably get much faster ROI, and you'll definitely have a much better customer experience by doing that. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. I think they don't probably pay enough attention to it as they should. I mean, in the end, it's just the foundation, and you're going to build on top of it. So it's going to change and iterate over time, and it should. But you need to factor that in as you build your foundation. That this is going to change. If you put it too much in stone at the beginning, and you don't give yourself any flexibility, in a couple of years you're going to be in trouble because, as you mentioned, new technology is going to come into play, and you won't be able to fit those into the stack, or at least test, experiment with fitting those into the stack and saying, hey, does this make sense for us? So that's usually a huge challenge. So you've got to have a flexible, modern architecture in place, and that's usually where we see the problem. Um, Legacy enterprise organizations tend to have a lot of legacy proprietary systems that are not built to talk to other systems, and that's usually where they end up running into the challenge. So then they end up coming and saying, well, okay, well, we're going to need to invest in updating our systems. But then when they see the dollar figures involved in doing that, they say, we can't spend that. We're not going to do that. Well, what they don't often think about is that the longer you take to do it, that the bigger that dollar figure is getting. It's not, the problem isn't going to go away because you've ignored it. It's just going to get more expensive. So at some point, you're going to have to invest in saying, we need to build a more modern foundation that's going to allow us to iterate and be a lot more nimble than we are today. And a lot of times, those more nimble foundations, as you know, can integrate to some degree with those proprietary systems and get some key data out of that. And at least that's a starting point, and then we can build on top of that. But you got to get started today. You can't wait till tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I mentioned, it happens all the time, and a lot of times, you probably run into this too. Company X, well, SaaS provider X will come in and say, look, all you need is our solution. It will do everything. We have this robust family of solutions that will do everything. And again, sometimes you take that with a grain of salt too, and it's just like, well, you know, 80% of the things you're talking about were purchased, and they don't really integrate with the rest of your stuff yet, and they probably won't for the next 5 years until you guys figure that out. So it's not going to be as clean as you're selling it to be. So it becomes a bit of a dance, right? To really figure out what is the right mix of technologies, what's the right combination of things that's going to get you to where you need to be, and not being oversold by a lot of these SaaS providers, but really saying, okay, we need to push all the technology and all the technology providers aside and just say, what is it we want to do as an organization? Where do we want to go? Okay, now what provider or combination of providers best allows us, accelerates that for us, and allows us to accomplish that? And sometimes we get so enamored and focused on the technology itself that we lose sight of our own goals in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. That's it. Exactly. Sure. So usually it just comes down to kind of understanding the metrics of what they're measuring, right? Which in and of itself, can be a bit of an exercise just in terms of what is or isn't currently being measured. But let's just operate on the assumption that things are being measured here. It really comes down to kind of understanding where the gaps are. So this is a funnel, this is a journey. A lot of the organizations that we deal with have much longer journeys because the purchase is much more considered. It's a larger purchase, so it takes a little bit more time to make a decision. So I think about an example of a client we have in executive education, and a lot of what they do, the courses they offer, are a couple of $1,000s, $3,000, $4,000, sometimes even more than that. That's not a decision you're going to make in a moment. This isn't on Amazon, picking up a quick widget for $20, right? It's going to take some time to decide to spend $3,000 on my education. So because of that, you get multiple touches, you get multiple visits. So what we have to kind of understand and do is say, okay, well, what is each tactic? What role is that playing in the decision? So how are they first learning about you? How are they learning about your product? Maybe that's via advertising. When they come to the site, what content are they consuming? How are they reacting to that content? Are they coming back? Are we communicating? Are we building value, right? So now you've got all these different touch points across the website, across email, across advertising, across social. And you're trying to understand, well, how each of these components contributing to what it is that you're doing, if they're contributing at all, and then where are those gaps? So, okay, there seems to be a big gap here between the person moving from perhaps consideration to decision, and now we need to find a way to fill that gap and provide the person the information they're looking for at this particular stage of the journey to move them and get them across that bridge to the decision phase. And maybe now the gap is, okay, they're ready to make a decision, but now they're running into issues with actually the registration process. Well, okay, what are those issues there? Well, maybe they can't find something in the process that's allowing them to easily check out. Okay, we need to find that gap, right? We identify that. And each of those are opportunities for tests, right? They're opportunities to experiment and say, okay, based on what we're seeing here, based on the data, it seems to be this is the issue. Let's test out a solution and see if that works. Oh, great, that worked. Okay, perfect. Let's implement that solution. Or, oh, no, perhaps that didn't work. That didn't quite meet the need. Okay, let's explore this some more. So you're really just trying to say there's a long journey here of these multiple points that people have to jump across, and basically you're trying to optimize each one. It's not a huge home run hit, but you're really trying to just optimize each one along the way. And it's a nonstop game because, again, competitors are changing, people are changing, the market's changing. So you're constantly trying to isolate those and iterate constantly to keep people moving all the way down that path. Yep. No, I think it's just a reflection of my generation. I'm a kid of the '80s, so things in the '80s in particular really kind of resonate with me and stand out to me. I have probably a strong emotional connection to those things, so it's very easy for me to relate that to a song, a movie, a TV show from my childhood or adolescence that really kind of resonates that thought that I'm trying to get across. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. So from a multi-touch standpoint, marketing automation, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, and Blue Shift are the two that we work with most often. We find that gives us a good spectrum, a good fit for different types of industries, different types of enterprise, mid-market and enterprise customers in terms of what they may or may not need exactly from the tool. Both compatible with different infrastructures and systems, so the ability to integrate with different structures and systems. That's not to say that other tools are bad. There are plenty of other tools in the market, and they're great. We're particularly of the mindset that we don't want to be experts in everything just because we feel like we can't be experts in everything. So let's find a good couple of partners that we feel like we can really be experts in, that we feel like can meet the overwhelming majority of needs of our customers, and really focus on that. And that we feel allows us to deliver a better experience to our clients. So that's why we focus. It's not because necessarily those tools are heads and shoulders better than everything else. It's just we found them to be good tools. We found them to be good partners, and we find that those meet the needs both in the short term and the long term of the customers that we deal with. So let's focus on that, become good at those tools, and that's going to allow us to best service our clients. We do. So from an experimentation personalization standpoint, we use Optimizely, A/B Tasty, and Web Trends Optimized are the three that we focus on there as well. So again, there are an enormous amount of tools that do experimentation and personalization. Those three we find definitely meet the needs of multiple clients, multiple industries, multiple organization sizes. Again, all proven themselves to be good partners from our standpoint. And both with what we talked about from a marketing automation standpoint and also experimentation, also different price points as well. What can a customer potentially afford, especially if they're just getting started with these technologies, and making sure we also try to take that into account as well, because we want them to get the most of their investment. How much are they going to spend given the size of their company? How much do they have to spend? We'd rather they get started, right, and start moving and start building that case, that ROI case and argument that can be made to the CFOs of the world, rather than have to wait and say, well, this is outside your price range. There's no way you can afford this, so we're just going to skip this entire initiative, and that's not the course of wisdom. Yeah, I think it comes down a lot to complexity, how complicated, and not even so much how complicated the customer journey is, but more the complexity and depth and complication of the back end systems. So, for example, Salesforce Marketing Cloud is a great tool if you already have a Salesforce infrastructure. It's not the only one by any stretch that integrates with Salesforce, but obviously there's a significant and robust integration with Salesforce out of the box with Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Since that exists, a lot of times there's a case to take advantage of that very quickly, rather than having to kind of come in and build a brand new integration with perhaps some third-party tool. Where perhaps if you're starting from scratch, then maybe starting with something as robust and technical Salesforce Marketing Cloud may be a little bit too much for you at this particular time, especially given maybe what your customer is, your customer journey, given what your industry is. So maybe if it's something more straightforward like online retail, for example, maybe something like a Blue Shift would be a better solution. It checks a number of boxes automatically. It helps you with marketing automation, helps you as a CDP, helps you with drive some personalization, some retargeting. So now all of a sudden you have one tool that checks a number of boxes and allows you to very quickly integrate with your e-commerce platform with something like a Shopify or something like that. So that might be a better solution for you in that particular scenario. So really it's about understanding the exact needs of the customer. Again, not just their needs today, but their needs tomorrow. And then understanding, okay, based on where you are today and where you want to go, we feel like this tool will get you there in the short term and in the long term. We don't want them to have to switch in 2 years or 3 years because they've outgrown this particular tool. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To be honest, it's not as challenging as you would think. When we started Smart Panda Labs, one of the decisions we made up front is that we wanted to be industry agnostic. We did not want to say we just specialize in travel or we just specialize in healthcare. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but one of the reasons for that is because we feel like when we come into a new industry, we come in with fresh eyes. We come in as the customer. Oftentimes in industries, industry experts, people who have been in the industry for a long time, perhaps for decades, they look at things a very specific way. This is the way things are done in healthcare. This is the way things are done in education. Well, that doesn't mean it's the right way. That's just the way that the pattern has developed over the course of time. Whereas when we come in, it's very easy for us to question that and say, well, why are we doing it like that? Because if I was your customer and I was coming in, that doesn't make any sense to me. I wouldn't see it like that. I would see it like this. So we like the fact of coming into a new industry because it gives us a very fresh set of eyes. It makes us feel much, much more like the customer looks at things. And it gives that perspective that allows us to be more objective in improving the customer experience, as opposed to saying, well, okay, this is travel and we specialize in travel, and travel, this is the way things are done. Well, now you got more of a sea of sameness, and that doesn't necessarily serve the customer in the best way. Often it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh yeah, we certainly have, and we were fortunate in that because we started being industry agnostic, we gained experience in multiple industries. So we have a handful of industries where we particularly have good experience: real estate, healthcare, travel, education, a couple of others. So we can speak intelligently to those different industries. And the thing is, to be honest, you and I both know, even within an industry, there's all kinds of nuance, right? I mean, you say travel, well, that can be a lot of things. Are you an airline? Are you a hotel? Are you a cruise line? Are you a rental car company? Are you a vacation rental, right? And each of those things has very, very different nuances in terms of how you deal with your customers as well. So the broad industry experience that we have gained has served us well, and certainly allowed us to do that. And then there are times where a person feels like, well, you don't have experience in our particular industry at all, and that's a deal breaker for us, and we understand that, and that's fine. We in those situations we even often say, well, perhaps we can refer you to someone else that has more experience in this industry. So we understand that as well. So I think there's a balance, right? I think you don't want to get too narrow and too myopic with your industry experience. But I think, to your point, there is value in just understanding in general the industry and some of its nuances, so that you can more quickly get up to speed and speak intelligently to it. So for us, and I think for you guys as well, there's a balancing act there, right? You don't want to go too far in one direction or the other. You want to keep a good balance. And fortunately, I think in doing that, both of us have gained experience in enough industries that we feel like we can effectively serve the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. Well, that is the trend of the day for sure. No, you certainly can't. AI is a bit of a it's a double edged sword, right? On the one hand, it's you can do some incredible things with it. You really can, in terms of speed and efficiency, in a number of different ways. And most every MarTech company that we work with, and I'm sure that you work with as well, has some application of AI in their stack at this point, and how they're leveraging and using it. Our biggest caution to our customers and our clients, and our potential even, is just it's another thing to experiment with and kind of roll into your processes via experimentation. It's not something to simply come in and say, okay, we're going to roll in and we're going to invest $2 million in AI this year. Well, how you invest that money, where you're investing that money, the best way for you in your particular industry and for your particular customer to leverage and use AI can be markedly different than it is for your competitor. So you need to test into that and understand where exactly are we making this investment? How can we best use and leverage this? Is that with internal processes? Is that with customer facing experiences? Is it some combination of it? If it is customer facing experiences, what experiences are best served by AI? Is it recommendations? Is it email communications? Is it personalization? Right? There's all these different ways that it can be used, but you've got to be able to measure and say, okay, we can definitively say we've done some testing and it's added value here. Okay, well now let's try this. Oh, that didn't work as well as we thought it would. We're going to need to pivot here and make a change. So with anything, you've got to have a framework in place to do A/B testing and experimentation, and AI is just another element that you kind of put into that to say, great, let's test it in these different ways, these different platforms, these different use cases, and see, is this working for us? Is this working for our customer? Or is it not? So that we can make the right choices and changes and the right investments in AI. Right. Honestly, I think the underlying things will remain the same. I think it's still the two fundamental steps here are saying step one, we need to build the right foundation. Step two, we need to create a framework that allows us to adapt and to change. And then ultimately, if you do those two fundamental first things, then step three is okay, now how do we build a culture around that? And how do we build a culture of innovation, of experimentation, of growing and changing, right? And then once you do that, establishing that culture and that framework around innovation, well, now you got to hold that together, right? And you need to drive that forward. So I think that's really what the digital strategist is going to be about. It's about saying, how do we set the foundation for it? How do we build the right framework for success? And then once we do those two things, then the third step is going to be, how do we hold that together moving forward? And I think that's what the modern digital strategist is really going to be about. It's about understanding those three pieces. Where is my organization in that range of maturity? And then once I isolate that, how do I get them to the next step? And then how do I hold that together moving forward? Yep. Yep. Exactly. Hmm. Yeah, I think it's really going to be about the methodology and mindset of who they're working with, right? So it can't be someone who says that their particular technology is kind of a one size fits all. That their solution is the solution to every single problem. It really comes back to what we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, which is what are your specific business goals, and that has to be the starting point. And we have to say, how does this map to those business goals to make sure this is meeting your needs, and not just simply checking a box of saying, hey, we've put this in place, and oh yeah, I've heard of those guys, or I've heard of that tool. Great. Oh, we're using that now too. Wonderful. Well, that may not be the best tool for you, right? That may not be the best use case for you. So I'd say that the number one thing that someone can keep in mind is when you start that discovery process, when you start those conversations, how much time are they taking up front to talk about you, to talk about your goals, your challenges, the things you're trying to do as a business, as a team, as a business leader, as an organization? How much time are they trying to understand your particular pain points? Because the solution is going to spring from that. It's the solution to a problem. If they don't understand the problem, then they can't offer a meaningful solution. If they come in the door and they immediately feel like, hey, we already have the solution to your problem because we already understand your problem, and they haven't even had a conversation with you, that to me is a red flag. Because you're not trying to understand me, you're just assuming that you understand my problem and that your solution is the best thing ever. You need to take some time to get to know me. This is going to be a relationship. Get to know me. Otherwise, this relationship isn't going to go very far. Yeah. Thank you again for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Okay. No, thank you guys. This is great.